On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we try to make sense of the New York Giants quarterback smoke screens with special guests Nick Falato of New York Giants on SI and Big Blue Banter. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And speaking of New York Giants on SI, you probably recognize this gentleman who's on screen with me. If you're watching, or if you are not watching, if you're listening, you're going to recognize his voice. He is Nick Falato. He's been doing all the New York Giants draft prospect previews on New York Giants on SI. He's been hard at work and doing a great job. And of course, we have to have him on the show before the draft. I mean, it's a tradition, right, Nick?
It is a tradition. And Patricia, thank you as always for bringing me on the show to talk some draft. Can't wait for this. I mean, right now, as we're recording this, a week and 2 days away from the draft, it really does creep up on you. But all the work that we put in, it's demanding but exciting at the same time.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, we got to start with the quarterback spot. Why not? I mean, it's the biggest need on this Giants team. They don't have a franchise quarterback. There's been talk it could be Shedeur Sanders at 3. There's been talk that the Giants might not take one in the first round. There's been talk that they might trade back into the first round. What scenario do you think makes the most sense to unfold for the Giants when it comes to the quarterback situation?
Due to the Giants selecting third and the way this draft is more than likely going to transpire, having Cam Ward go number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans, leaving the Cleveland Browns in this interesting spot where they could select Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, which would bestow one of the two to the New York Giants. It makes me not want the New York Giants to select a quarterback at 3 overall, meaning the Giants should either pursue a quarterback at 65 or at 34. And judging by the draft and some of the players who will be available at 34, it leads me to suggest that I might want to avoid going quarterback at 34. This is not a great quarterback class. And as much as I can see a path to success for a player like Shedeur Sanders, passing up on a Hunter or an Abdul Carter, it's a tough pill for me to swallow because I don't necessarily see such a high ceiling with a player like Shedeur Sanders. I think there is certainly, again, a path where he could be successful. I don't know what that success exactly looks like or how high that ceiling is due to his physical limitations and his, even though he's Deion Sanders' kid, his lack of high-end athletic traits, which is just really weird to me. But I appreciate Sanders' toughness. I love how he can operate a rhythmic passing attack. I love his intelligence pre to post snap, what he sees, how he can diagnose it. And he had to overcome a lot of obstacles being the quarterback of Colorado due to a really subpar offensive line that stifled and hindered Pat Shurmur's offense to basically 4 different types of concepts and a lot of screen passes. But with all of that said, I'm just not in love with this quarterback class. And I don't want the Giants to pass on a possible all-pro player. And that's what I think Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter can be at 3 overall to select a quarterback who I think has the upside to be maybe an average to a slightly above average quarterback in the National Football League. So that's where I'm at with the quarterback position. If the Giants need to take a quarterback, if they feel like it's necessary to take a quarterback, I completely understand that, right? Like we've been talking about quarterback position basically since 2020. I think I'd rather take a shot at Tyler Shuck a little bit later on in the draft, somebody who I really enjoy just from a purely tangible and physical perspective. I'd rather go that route. I don't know exactly where these guys are going to come off the board. Last year, no one thought Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix would be pushed up as high as they did. So it's a little bit unpredictable. And I'm sure the Giants will have a much better idea than I would when it comes to that. But I'm not necessarily in on the Giants going quarterback super high in this draft. I won't throw a fit if it happens. You got to take your guy if you think he's your guy, but I have my reservations.
Nick, that being said, there's a school of thought here that if you are going to take a quarterback, you want to take them in round one because this gives you the fifth year option.
Yeah.
And if the Giants are going to do that, obviously it's to develop a guy. But that being said, this is a team that has to win now. It doesn't have the luxury. This isn't like this is the first year or the second year of the Joe Shane, Brian Dable era. This team has to win now. So that being said, in your opinion, does it almost make sense to just punt on a quarterback altogether? Maybe pick one up as an undrafted free agent if there's one there, and just look to next year and just ride this year out with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston.
I think if there's somebody you really like and the value is there, you go with it, despite the fact that Joe Shane and Brian Dable are on an incredibly hot seat, which was one of the reasons why I did not advocate for them to be brought back. I didn't want to be put into this predicament, but to the credit of Joe Shane and Brian Dable, they were able to somewhat solidify the quarterback position to make it not a demand as they head into this draft so they can really focus on 2025. I'm not necessarily going to say, Patty, like, hey, I don't want them to take quarterback because of all of the, I feel like the reasons that you just articulated, which do have merit, but I think you go BPA a lot of the times. You help round out this roster. There's not necessarily any glaring holes on this roster. I think we can both agree interior defensive line is something they need to focus on next to Dexter Lawrence. Glaring hole, I think that could be argued. But other than that, you're looking at offensive line depth and then just bring in the best football players and then long-term solution at quarterback. But the caveat to that is, do you believe any of these quarterbacks are long-term solutions or at least have the upside to be long-term solutions, sans Shadur Sanders, if you're going to go with that blue chip type of player in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter? So I'm not going to say don't take one, but I don't necessarily think it's a necessity just to do it and then to bring him in. But we all know, Patty, not to go full 360 here, this quarterback position has been a problem, but it really just comes down to how do you evaluate this quarterback group? It's not the strongest.
Yeah, I definitely. You mentioned Tyler Shuck as a guy that you like. What is it you like about him for the Giants? How does he fit what they do?
Tyler Shuck has an arm. That's what I really love about him. I want a quarterback with true arm talent who can make every throw task to him. Every throw in the NFL, you need far hash rips outside the numbers. You need somebody to pace the ball well over the middle of the field, over those linebackers, before those safeties, hit hole shots, hit the seam. Tyler Shuck can do all that. The issue with Tyler Shuck, and one of the reasons why he's not being talked about in a more highly regarded fashion, is he spent 7 years in college. This guy was Justin Herbert's backup. His first year of college was 2018. That was a long time ago. And he suffered 3 different injuries, but these weren't like torn ACLs. These weren't significant shoulder injuries. It was a broken collarbone. He broke his collarbone twice. So that is something that you could say, oh, is that going to reoccur? I'm not a doctor. I have no idea. And the other one was a broken fibula on a hip drop tackle, but they're not necessarily, they're not as severe as Michael Penix Jr.'s injuries were when he was coming out of Washington last year, for instance. And he's going to be 26 years old. That's another big issue that a lot of people are a little hung up on with Shuck. But you want somebody with a clean drop back, somebody who I felt like did a solid job operating quick game, had a little bit of creativity to him. He's not the most, he doesn't thrive when he is escaping the pocket, but he can escape. I think it's something that he can lean on a little bit. But overall, I want to bet on tools and I want to bet on traits. And he has all of that when it comes to his ability to throw the damn football, his ability to stay calm under pressure and be tough. Although I will say, I wish he was a little bit, there were times where I felt like he did shy away from the pressure a little bit, but I don't think that was necessarily something that plagued his game. So if I had to take a risk on a quarterback in the 3rd round and someone who's going to be available, I don't think Jalen Milroe will be available at that point, the Alabama kid. I would take the risk, if you want to call it that, on a Tyler Shuck, the quarterback out of Louisville, Texas Tech, and Oregon. Had a lot of stops.
Nick, you mentioned his age, and I find a lot of people bring that up. But yet you see quarterbacks who play into their late 30s. Aaron Rodgers is 41. Why is age such a big issue when discussing these prospects?
I don't think it's necessarily as big of an issue. I think people want these younger kids that they could develop into their system. So by the time they are 26, depending on where their contract aligns, that they'll be very comfortable and there's just another possible 15, 20 years of play. When it comes to Shuck, I think a lot of people just get hung up on the fact that he was in college for so long. He did only have 1 year starting, which was at Louisville, but a lot of that was due to these injuries that he suffered 3 consecutive seasons at Texas Tech. And a lot of them, again, not these injuries that typically are long-term, like associated with long-term that could plague him for the rest of his career. They were broken bones. I don't necessarily look at it as a huge slight being a 26-year-old. I don't personally. I can understand why some do. Maybe people will feel like he is maxed out from an experience standpoint and from a tool standpoint, but I believe the maxed out version of Tyler Shuck from a tool standpoint is wildly impressive, and it's something that I'm willing to roll the dice on.
Hey, Giant fans, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means that when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. So go on, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we're speaking with Nick Falato. He is a writer for New York Giants on SI, does the draft prospect previews. He also contributes to Big Blue View. He has his own podcast, Big Blue Banter. He's doing so much, and he does such a great job of it. Nick, let's talk now. You mentioned in the last segment, we talked about the Giants' third overall pick in the draft and the guys you would like. And you mentioned Abdul Carter, and if Travis Hunter falls down to the Giants, maybe him. So I want to get your take on where their best fits are on a Giant team, and I want to start with Carter since he's probably going to be the pick, I would think. They have Kayvon Thibodeau, they have Brian Burns, they just signed Chauncey Golston. Where or what kind of role would you see Abdul Carter filling on this Giants defense if he is the pick?
Real quick, I do think Travis Hunter will go second overall. I'm not sold that the Giants won't go Shedeur Sanders. I went on your best friend Ed Valentine's podcast back in like January, and I was asked if who was going to be the pick in your honest opinion, and I said Shedeur. Now, again, I'm not in love with that, but I just know Joe Shane has been to, I don't even know how many games actually, but like countless amount of games and has worked this kid out, and they've put a lot of time into Shedeur Sanders. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's the pick, but I want to circle back to your original question. Abdul Carter, how will he be used? With the current personnel saying Kayvon Thibodeau isn't traded, Kayvon Thibodeau's on the roster, I think Abdul Carter wouldn't start necessarily as a penciled in starter, rather a player who is going to find his way onto the football field, not just in passing situations, but creatively. When you look at the modern NFL, you look at modern NFL defensive players and their usage, especially if they are this type of build where they're like 240 pounds, they can be edge rushers, they can be linebackers, and they're wildly fluid in space like an Abdul Carter. I think that's exactly how Shane Bowen would use him. He would be on the edge with Brian Burns in certain packages. He would be kicked inside as a linebacker sometimes with Bobby Okereke or with Micah McFadden in a 3-3-5 type of set. I think you can use Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter interchangeably, right? I think you can also we know Shane Bowen is a defensive coordinator who uses a ton of simulated pressure, meaning he's going to send 4, but which 4? One of those 4 aren't a traditional pass rusher, and a traditional pass rusher would be a player who drops off into space. And Abdul Carter can do that at a high level. I think it just gives Shane Bowen this ability to send 4 in a variety of different ways that from a variety of different angles as well that are going to plague the offensive protection package. Abdul Carter isn't necessarily a player who I think is going to be this, I'm going to stack you, I'm going to shed offensive tackles. He's not necessarily that. He wins with his movement skills, with his lateral skills. Similar to Brian Burns, I think Brian Burns has a little bit more oomph to him, but I don't think he's a liability as a run defender. I think you can put him out there, and he has the He has the experience as a actual linebacker. And when you go back to that tape, it's not necessarily the most refined, but it's not terrible either. So I think you can use him in that regard. If the Giants were to select a player like Abdul Carter, the New York Giants, I believe, would have the best pass rush in the National Football League, with Dexter Lawrence pushing the pocket and then Abdul Carter and Brian Burns screaming off the edge and Kayvon Thibodeau kicked inside. And that's just one way that you can use these four players. There are a variety of different ways, and you can overload offensive line. You can put Dexter Lawrence as a 3-tech or even a 1-shade with Brian Burns and Abdul Carter all to the left, Kayvon to the right. You're going to get one-on-one matchups with Kayvon, and then you can bring a blitz over to that side or simulated pressure, dropping Abdul or Brian into a coverage. There's just so much you could do. If the Giants run defense, and that's something else we'll get to in a little bit, the Giants run defense can hold up long enough to get them into 2nd and 8 or 3rd and 6 situations, this pass rush would thrive and it would command games. And that's something, as Ernie Accorsi always said, you can never have too many pass rushers. That's something that I want to see from this. We saw it a little bit last year in the very beginning of the year. Remember, the Giants led the league in sacks, mostly because they played Deshaun Watson, and then they were able to get after the Seattle Seahawks as well. But I think with Abdul Carter, you're just talking about sky is the limit with the pass rush, and it's something I would love to see. So there's so many different ways you can use this player, and you can use him in a traditional way as well. You can kick him inside. You can use him at linebacker. It's something that I hope we get to see, and that he's the pick at 3 if Travis Hunter is off the board, of course.
Okay, before we get to Travis Hunter, you brought up the run defense, so let's talk about that. Can Abdul Carter contribute to the run defense, and if so, in what kind of capacity?
Again, I think he can use the lateral skills to just penetrate and be disruptive in that manner. And I don't think he's incapable of taking on blocks. I don't think he's going to get driven into the ground. It's just not necessarily his strength, I would say. He's more going to avoid the blocker, dip around, and then present his numbers to the running back's path to alter the path. Is he the most physical? No, not necessarily. But I think he is more than capable to be a starter who is not going to necessarily be a liability. His floor, though, if it is a little bit too much for him, is one of the best situational pass rushers you will ever have. And I don't think that's what he is. I don't think he's going to play to his floor. I'm just being real here, because I don't think it, like the way I phrased it in the report is I don't want to say Carter's foolproof, even though I love his tape and ability. There's a non-zero chance that Carter may be targeted on early downs and could be exposed against better, more physical teams in the trenches. But on the flip side, he has the room to grow into his body. He's insanely athletic, and he only has 1 year starting at edge. Sure, a defensive coordinator may have to get creative if Carter struggles to consistently defend the run, but his run defense ability in college doesn't suggest a liability, just not necessarily a certainty. And his pass rushing skills are through the roof with an insanely high ceiling. It's something to acknowledge, but it's not a deal breaker. That's the way I framed it in my report about Abdul Carter, and I'm willing to roll the dice on that.
And you can check out that report, by the way, Giant fans. That's on New York Giants on SI. So we'll make sure we put a link to all of Nick's profiles, draft profiles that he's been doing. He's got plenty more coming up as we get countdown to the draft. All right, Nick, let's talk about Travis Hunter. Now, I don't think Hunter will fall to the Giants, but you have to, prepare for everything, obviously. First off, is he a corner or is he a receiver full-time? Or does it vary according to what team he's going to? And if he goes to the Giants, where does he best fit in?
I think he can do either. So it really does vary per team. So let's say that he's the selection to the New York Giants. I think the Giants might want to roll with him at wide receiver to start and give Tay Banks another chance, another opportunity. And if something happens to Tay Banks or Paulson Adebo, injury-wise, you have Travis Hunter that you can lean on. It's just how much do you trust his ability to get up to speed? Because it seems like it's much easier to play cornerback with packages on offense, which I get. I'm wondering how the Giants feel maybe about using Travis Hunter a little bit more full-time at wide receiver with Malik Neighbors, and then seeing if the cornerback experiment of Tay Banks fails or an injury befalls the Giants, could they switch Travis Hunter over to the defensive side? I understand this is a conundrum. It's a conundrum that I welcome, though, because I know Travis Hunter, wherever you decide to put him, he is going to thrive, and he has Pro Bowl type of potential. And if you want, you can just stick him at corner, have him be that corner, continue to grow at corner like he did throughout the 2024 season, and then have like 20 plays, packages, third down, red zone, where you do put him in on offense. That seems to be probably the wiser, the default choice if you do want to use him as a cornerback. But I am curious, and I don't know. I don't have, I'm not able to talk to the kid or anything like that. If the Giants could do it in the other way and use him more as a receiver, because looking at Malik Neighbors with Travis Hunt, like how our offense is going to guard that 11 personnel package where you can interchange Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. And then you have Theo Johnson fully back, healthy, stretching the seam with a quarterback who has a deep passing on his mind consistently in Russell Wilson. It's something I'm very excited to see if that actually does materialize. So I think it's an issue, a problem, quote unquote, that I'm willing to face to see exactly how the Giants use him. But that's where I'm at right now. I'd lean a little bit more offensive than defenses just because I'm not fully sold that Tay Banks is a bust.
Right. Now, Nick, there's always a chance because it happens every year, and I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but there's always a chance that the Giants throw us a curveball in the first round. Realistically speaking, what do you think that curveball could be that would make the most sense for them if it is not Shedeur Sanders, if it is not Travis Hunter, if it is not Abdul Carter, and if Giant fans everywhere see this and they just start screaming?
I mean, it would have to be a trade down, right? Like, I think if the Giants stay put at 3, it's one of those 3 players. It's one of those 3 players. It really is only one of 2 players, whoever the Cleveland Browns don't choose. So that looks like right now, about a week plus away from the draft, Abdul Carter or Shedeur Sanders. But if it's not them, it's got to be a trade down. And if it's not that, maybe they love another quarterback and they take him at 3. And it's just like, but I don't think that's going to happen. Like I don't believe that's going to happen. So for me, it's kind of an easy evaluate. Is it Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, depending on the Browns, or do they take Shedeur Sanders at 3?
Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. All right, we are speaking with Nick Falato, and we're talking Giants draft, and we could talk to Nick all day long. But Nick, let's talk about now some of the sleeper picks. We've been talking about the obvious ones. Let's talk about some of the sleeper picks. Who are some of the guys you like on day 2, day 3 for the Giants?
Day 2, day 3, it depends. So I'll say this about the draft, right? Most drafts, I feel like they're tiered differently where it's a little bit more predictable. After pick like 15, I could see somebody who's like ranked like 60th on some of these experts boards go in the first round. There could be a lot of surprise first round picks towards the latter half and maybe even in the upper half of the first round, because this is more of a deep draft rather than a draft that is as predictable as previous ones, right? So some of these guys that I'm going to talk about, I don't even know how much of quote unquote sleepers they are, but I'll start at the edge position with a player called Josiah Stewart, who is a Michigan edge rusher. Look, I don't typically like going with these short-armed edge rushers, right? Sub 32-inch arms. That's not necessarily something I love. But when you watch Josiah Stewart's tape, it was very obvious that offenses were like, all right, we've been focusing on Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and that guy over there, number 0, is kicking our ass. So we need to do something and shift some blocking over towards him. And he's been praised all throughout the Michigan program. This guy can convert speed to power, heavy hands, very good bases, not bullied around. Put a tight end on him. The tight end's going to wind up on his rear end. I absolutely love the spirit of this player, Josiah Stewart from Michigan. He can run defend. He can pass rush. He can win high side. He can win with counters to the inside. And because of those short arms, I'm thinking he may fall to day 3. I think his skill set is a second-round player. So I know a lot of NFL teams have thresholds, and they don't want to They don't want to take players who don't meet certain thresholds, but this is the type of player I want to roll the dice on if he is available at pick 105. Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. Looking around my board a little bit more, look, I did so many cornerbacks to start, and I don't think the Giants are going cornerback after signing Paulson Adebo. Like, they could a little bit later. I loved Upton Stout from Western Kentucky, but they have Drew Phillips, and they're similar type of players. I loved Azariah Thomas from Florida State as well. He's more of an outside guy, but I think the Giants have to spend the 34th pick on him, and New York's more than likely not going to go that direction. What I really focus on when we're talking about the 34th pick and the 65th pick, interior offensive line and interior defensive line. And there are players who I think you got Darius Alexander from Toledo, Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. I don't believe Kenneth Grant from Michigan or Derek Harmon from Oregon would be around, but if they were around at 34, that is like punch it in, send it. But those guys are more than likely going to be top 20 picks. That's Kenneth Grant and Derek Harmon. So if we're looking at 34, Darius Alexander, older prospect from Toledo, but somebody who is just an energizer bunny with a bunch of different pass rushing moves, a great first step, somebody who would complement Dexter Lawrence very well. Or Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, a little bit different because he only played like 20 snaps a game at Tennessee. They were in a deep platoon rotation over there. But again, if you want somebody who has the pass rushing specialist type of name to him, somebody who can really just get after it with his first step quickness, with his hand usage, and with his relentless nature, that is Omar Norman Lott. But he played like 86 run defending snaps in 2024. So I'm like, there's a little bit of uncertainty. I don't want to hold that against him, but that's always something that that leads me to just be a little bit uncomfortable, right? But very good player too. And if he's available at 65, somebody I would like. If we're talking about day 3 defensive lineman, somebody I liked, did not test all that well at the combine, is Iowa's Yaya Black. This is a run defending type of player. The Giants want more run defense depth, somebody who could possibly start on early downs. He's just sturdy. He can absorb those double teams. He's not going to get pushed around. And that's similar. If we're going to go back to day 2 and talk about Tyleik Williams, he's very much like that. You want to double team him, he's going to find a way to split it. He can anchor down. He's going to ruin your duo in your inside zone game because he's going to defeat those combo blocks and find a way to get into the backfield to make tackles. So I was a big fan of what I saw from Tyleik Williams. I'm not sure if his profile posted quite yet over there at Giants Country, but if it did, please go and check that out because he was another very fun player. And that's just focusing on the interior defensive line, some of these edge players. I don't believe Boston College's Donovan Ezaraku is going to be available at pick 34, but if the Giants want it, if they don't go Abdul Carter, if the Giants wanted to add another edge, Abdul Carter light, I guess, if you want to be lazy-ish with your analysis, Donovan Ezaraku is that type of player who can win high side, has the explosiveness, has a variety of different moves, not the best against the run, but something that if you put him on the Giants right now with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, situational pass rusher, gives you that juice, deep rotation. Absolutely love that for New York. That's Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. So I know I focused a lot on the interior defensive line and the edge, so I want to kick over a little bit to the interior offensive line. And a lot of these guys are day 2 guys. I think this is where pick 34 is. One of the players I loved, I just finished his report recently, and I've watched a lot of them, so I'm glad I finally got to write this report, and that's Tyler Booker from Alabama. I don't think he'll be available at 34, but if he is, I think the Giants really have to consider just submitting it. And it's a lot like Orlando Brown because he had a terrible combine. People are looking at the combine. Oh, he's like 5th percentile on this. I don't care. Watch his tape. Watch him play. If you want a long-term starter who can mirror and pass protect, understands how to use his leverage, resync his anchor, one of the best anchors I've seen in college football, while also understanding how to defeat a bunch of different hand usage from defensive players, while also being a dominant run blocker who wants to inflict pain on the defense, that's Tyler Booker from Alabama. So he is the number 1 interior offensive lineman I have in this entire draft. And if he's there at 34, Giants should select him. But Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State and Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State are 2 players that I'm also very intrigued by at that position. Gray Zabel, you can kick him really anywhere. Donovan Jackson's more than likely going to be a guard, but he thrived at left tackle when Josh Simmons went down with his injury against Oregon and helped Ohio State win the national championship. So I know I'm throwing a lot of names out here right now, but all the players I listed, a lot of these I'm considering at 34 because I think the trenches are paramount right now. There are other positions that maybe we'll get into in a little bit that I want to go over as maybe sleeper picks for 34 or 65. And I'm not necessarily somebody who's like, oh, well, we pick here, we got to get this position. The only reason I'm focusing on this is because the talent might match where the Giants are selecting at 34 and 65 for the trenches, which I believe is a massive need for this team right now. We've seen them not focus on the trenches or misplace their focus by selecting the wrong players. And the Giants have suffered. Like, you need to be able to dictate on the offensive and defensive line. We've seen the Philadelphia Eagles have a lot of success doing this, and I hope the Giants do as well.
Okay, Nick, when you look at this Giants roster, we talk about sneaky needs. And obviously, the draft is not all about necessarily this year, it's about the future. And teams approach it that way. So, that being said, when you look at the roster, you mentioned the trenches as being an important area, which I agree. But what other positions do you see on this team, maybe where they might want to get a guy in here if the value is good and start developing that guy to ultimately step in?
So there's two positions, one on offense, one on defense. I'll focus on the defensive position first, and it's linebacker, actually. We know that the Giants sent their linebackers coach, John, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but he's the Giants linebackers coach. They sent him to the UCLA Pro Day for a private workout for Carson Schlesinger. And Carson Schlesinger, he only really had one real year of production at UCLA, but when you turn on his tape, he's one of my favorite players that I watched this entire draft class. And he is a prime candidate to possibly be available at 34. That would be a surprise pick at 34. One that I'm like, oh man, who do we pass up to select that? But one that I'm also like, I am so stoked that this guy's a New York Giant because I like his skill set. And when you look at the Giants long-term, you can get out of the Bobby Okereke contract after this season, save $9 million, I think it is, on the cap. I think you eat like a $5 million dead cap. And then Micah McFadden's a free agent. So look at the linebacker position. I like Chris Board, who they brought in, the kid from the 49ers. He's another one who is a possible developmental player, special teamer. But it could be argued that the Giants need a long-term solution at linebacker. So you don't work guys out with your specific positional coach for no reason. So that could be a surprise one, and one that I can talk myself into, right? And I really just love Carson Schlesinger's game. But other than linebacker, I look at wide receiver, and I know they brought Darius Slayton back. I understand that. I love Darius Slayton. I don't know if the Giants care for Jalen Hyatt. That could just be like a bust pick at this point. I'm not trying to throw the kid under the bus, but he could hardly see the field last year in what was a quote-unquote lost season. That's a problem. And then you have Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to be a free agent soon, and then obviously Malik Neighbors. And you look at this just 11 personnel package, you like it, but could you use a different body type? Could you use somebody who is maybe bigger, maybe a little bit more of a prototypical X? Something the Giants thought they signed when they went out and got Kenny Golladay, but we saw how that went. And you look at this wide receiver group, and you have a lot of guys who fit the bill as prototypical X's. And then you also have a lot of guys who are more Z's, right? Some guys who could be move type guys like Kyle Williams from Washington State, who I absolutely love. Or Jack Besh, who could be an X. He could be a Z. He could also just be a big slot. That's the TCU guy. There's just so many receivers in this class that I think the Giants, if you put them on the Giants, you're like, oh, wow, this guy is like a Michael Pittman Jr. type of wide receiver, right? Like, not like a top echelon guy in the league, but somebody who is respectable, somebody who could be a number one on another team, but they wouldn't have to be for the Giants because the Giants have freaking Malik Neighbors, who is an absolute stud. But I don't know who's going to be available for pick 34, and I don't really want the Giants to do this at 34. I'm looking more at 65, at 99, at 105 for some of these wide receivers. And I know they just had Savion Williams in from TCU, Jack Besh's teammate, and Savion Williams is very raw. Reminds me a little bit of Laviska Shenault, and I know that hasn't worked out. He came out of Colorado a couple years ago, but just a raw receiver who TCU was just trying to get the football in his hands. When you look at him, I think he's like, I don't have his numbers in front of me. He's like 6'4", 6'5", like 230 pounds, just an absolute playmaker. Just get him the football and allow him to do his thing, but just very raw as a route runner and doesn't exactly know what he's doing or where he has to be. It's funny when you evaluate those TCU receivers because you see Jack Besh, who is a technician, a great route runner, knows exactly where he has to be, when he has to be there. And Savion Williams, who's not necessarily there, but you just get the football in his hands and you're like, holy crap, this guy could do so much. Giants had Williams in for that private visit. He could be maybe an option and somebody who wouldn't have to be thrusted into the lineup because the Giants are set in their 11 personnel package as of right now. So I do think, though, just overall, I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants in one of their first 3 or 4 picks select a wide receiver, bring him in, and then you look at it and you're like, huh, this guy actually fits in here, and there's a nice rotation, and they offer something different. Alik Ayumanor, I can never say his name, kid from Stanford, Jane Higgins from Iowa State are two of those like X type of receivers who are big bodies who I think fit this bill. And if you want another X, maybe later on day 3, tested poorly at the combine, Pat Bryant from Illinois, somebody I I've really liked his game. I have a higher grade than consensus on him. He's one of those 50-50 type of jump ball wide receivers. You can sign me up for somebody like that a little bit later on in the draft so the Giants can just focus on those trenches and get the best players into their building.
Nick, final question for you. You look at what the Giants did in free agency. They basically set themselves up to where they really don't have to come out of the draft and say, we got to have this, we got to have that. Although, obviously you could say make a case for quarterback, you can make a case for defensive line. But that being said, when you look at the nitty gritty of the personnel and the makeup, on offense, they are returning, I think, 10 of the 11 starters from last year. An offense that wasn't really very good. So that being said, I mean, do they change things up? What do they do on offense? Because it's got to be, the quarterback play was a big thing. I get that, but there were other issues with the offense. I mean, how much do you see them maybe addressing that? Who makes sense, and where do they attack specifically on the offense besides quarterback, obviously a long-term quarterback, besides receiver, which you just mentioned?
Yeah, so the quarterback was a massive issue. I think the quarterback significantly hindered Brian Daboll from being able to run the system that he wanted to run. And he was calling some plays that he wanted Daniel Jones or Tommy DeVito to execute upon, and they were reluctant. They couldn't throw the football. If we're going to focus on some of the issues of the offense, it's that. And then there was a lot of young players starting on the offense, rookies who are now going to be in their second season, who should be more experienced, ready to play. That's Theo Johnson. That's Tyrone Tracy Jr., who needs to not fumble the football a lot, but I remain very high on him. And then Malik Neighbors. And then you look at, I would say, the offensive line. I think the offensive line from a pass protection standpoint took significant strides forward last year, but their run blocking was still a little suspect. I think Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Devin Singletary probably did more than what they're given credit for when it comes to creating yards after contact, when it comes to making critical missed tackles forcing those, right? They were more the engines of the rushing attack than that offensive line was. That's something I hope can be rectified. But I look at the offensive line, they don't necessarily have dominant run blocking personnel. Specifically, John Runyon isn't necessarily that. Neither is John Michael Schmitz. I think Evan Neal could be if he acclimated himself inside. That's another story. I like Greg Van Roten. I think Greg Van Roten is a glue type of player who doesn't have to start, but if he's starting, he's not going to be a liability for you. And then you have Jermaine Illuminor. You're going to play him at right tackle. He can run block. He can pass block. He's a good damn football player. Andrew Thomas, one of the best tackles in the league. So I think there's potential there. But you need to, I think, fix the rushing attack. I think having Russell Wilson and his ability to throw deep will challenge defenses, and that will alleviate the burden that the defense applies to the offense from a personnel standpoint in the box, which should help the rushing attack. So that's why I think the quarterback is the main ingredient to fixing a lot of the issues that plague the New York Giants offense. But it's not necessarily like the Giants are adding a top 5 quarterback. This is a league average quarterback in Russell Wilson if everything goes right for him. I still think when you look at what he was able to do passing deep down the field, he was a top 3 quarterback in passing efficiency deep, in accuracy, in explosive plays, and all of that relative to how much he played, because he didn't play the whole season with Justin Fields starting. So I'm excited for the Russell Wilson experience. I don't think I have delusions of grandeur when it comes to thinking the Giants are going to be this great team, but it's going to be a much better product. And if the defense can take significant strides forward, maybe we're looking at a respectable team that isn't just this pushover like they have been, right? But a lot of things need to come together. They need to freaking stay healthy as well. And I also think the Giants might add another running back. This is a very deep running back class. I like Devin Singletary. I really like Tyrone Tracy Jr. I don't know if the Giants like Eric Gray. I'm not sure what they feel, but I think they can upgrade themselves and maybe add a different player, because neither Devin Singletary or Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a bruiser. So if you get somebody who's a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, somebody who can move the chains, just a different type of running style to punish the defense, like a Kyle Monangai from Rutgers is somebody I've been saying his name for quite a while. That's the type of player I would like the Giants to add maybe late on day 3 if they are available. And we know the Giants have had a lot of running backs who are like second round, possible first round running backs they've had in. So if you want to talk about another surprise pick at 34, I can't see it happening because of what Joe Shane did with Saquon Barkley. But why else are you really bringing in a lot of these guys? Maybe they'll trade back, accumulate more second round picks, and then they take a shot on a Travion Henderson or a Keyshawn Jenkins from Ohio State, or Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Cam Scadaboo from Arizona State, right? Like they've done their homework on these guys. And all those 4 guys I listed, they can do a lot of different things for this offense. If you bring in a guy like Travion Henderson, you're talking about explosive plays as a running back now, right? Those other guys, they're a little bit more physical or gritty type of dudes who could do everything. They're receiving backs. So I think that could be another surprise, like a big surprise if the Joe Shane went in that direction. I know I'm rambling at this point, but yeah, I do think the quarterback is the primary way that this is going to change how defenses play the offense, which will allow the offense to hit its maximum potential, which we have not seen since Brian Dable was hired.
I'm sorry. There was one more I had to ask you, only
Oh,
because
yeah.
you brought it up. You mentioned the interior of the offensive line. They brought back Greg Van Roten, but he's not the long-term answer. Very good player. He could play center. He could play guard. You mentioned Evan Neal and the conversion that, was supposed to start last year, but because of the injuries, it's going to start this year. They've got Jake Kubas there.
Yes.
And then at center, John Michael Schmidt's not a horrible player, but probably not where we thought he might be. That being said, how would you kind of work with that offensive line as far as, obviously I think they're going to give everybody another year, but are there prospects, maybe a good guard / center that they can bring in case Evan Neal doesn't pan out, in case Jake Kubas can't make the conversion to center and add that to his thing, and in case John Michael Schmitz just doesn't get any better?
Yeah, so the prospect that fits that the best would be Grace Abel. We talked about him a little bit earlier from North Dakota State, was played all across the offensive line. And at the Senior Bowl, he was taking snaps at center, and he looked good doing that. So that's the type of player where it's like you can bring him in. He'll be the right guard. He has a tackle experience, but he probably get kicked inside at the next level. But if John Michael Schmitz does fail, you can slide him in and he could play center for you. Marcus Membo from Purdue is another player who maybe you can argue has some type of positional flexibility. That could be a pick at 65 and not necessarily at 34, whereas Grace Abel's more of a 34 type of guy. And then there is the whole Tyler Booker situation that I brought up a little earlier. That's the player that it's like, if the Giants selected him at 34, if he was available, right guard, staple it in. And now Greg Van Roten can possibly kick to center, depending on how long he's going to be in town. I know he just had a kid last year. He's a Long Island guy. He wants to be in the area. I think he fits what the Giants need. He's competent enough. If John, I don't think John Michael Schmitz is at a point where it's like, hey, we're going to bench you, but I'm right there with you. He has underwhelmed, I would say, significantly since he was a 57th overall pick just 2 years ago. You need to take some steps forward at this point. But if the Giants got Tyler Booker, that can allow Greg Van Roten, who has center experience, to play center if John Michael Schmitz does not take those developmental steps that we believe he is capable of taking.
They basically need to start, having guys compete for jobs. Too many guys, I think, in the past were just handed jobs because they were draft picks. I mentioned quarterback. I know in my analysis, Daniel Jones getting the job automatically. John Michael Schmitz is another. I mean, you got to have some competition, especially if a guy isn't like top 5, top 3 in his position. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. And I'm trying to think of other players on the offense that fit into that. Those are, well, Daniel Jones isn't here anymore, but John Michael Schmitz is the prime player where it's like, yeah, you were a 2nd round pick, but you're not really getting it done. I just think it's mostly, Patty, because they don't have another option at the moment if Greg Van Roten is penciled in to start at right guard.
Evan Neal is another.
Yeah, and Evan Neal. But this is the thing, like this regime has shown that they're not afraid to do that, whereas past regimes have given scholarship to players. I think Jalen Hyatt is a good example of this. He's not finding the football field whatsoever. Giants traded up to get this guy. When this regime came in, Kenny Golladay was making how much? Like millions and millions of dollars, and they started David Sills over him because he wasn't performing the way that they believed he should have been performing. So we've seen this regime do this in the past. Well, with John Michael Schmitz, I don't think he's that bad yet, nor do I think the Giants have the option to replace him. So I think that's where that goes. But I'm right there with you. You compete every day. They preach it, but make sure they're doing it at this point. No one should be given a starting spot. No one should feel comfortable, right? Especially if they're not like Andrew Thomas or Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, I was just going to say those two guys are probably your exceptions there.
Yeah.
All right. He is Nick Falato, and you can find his work over on New York Giants on SI, all his draft prospect profiles. I think we're up to 65, I want to say, and there's still more that we're releasing one a day. So I'll post a link to all his draft profiles. They're really good. They're really broken down well. You can also find him on Big Blue Banter. You can find him on Big Blue View. And one day, who knows where he's going to land? He's destined for big things. I really believe that. So always appreciate you coming on, Nick. We could probably talk ball for hours on hours, but I appreciate you coming on. Giant fans, I appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget, we're going to have on tomorrow's show, I'm going to give you a recap and takeaways on what Joe Shane had to say. And then, of course, Friday, we'll wrap things up with another show. So make sure you keep it here because we are getting so close to the draft. It's going to be exciting. We're going to find out who, and then we're going to break it all down for you here on the Locked On Giants podcast. For Nick Falato, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, I'll see you tomorrow.